Hello, welcome to Lei's Looking Glass. I'm Lei. We've all seen the life of a Chinese emperor portrayed in TV dramas or movies. Absolute power, lavish banquets, thousands of concubines, parties at will, and endless luxury. But how much of that is real? Let's look at the Qing Dynasty emperors. Not only was it the most recent dynasty in Chinese history, but its archival records are also incredibly detailed. A typical day for a Qing emperor was far more demanding than most modern professional schedules. There's an entire set of daily logs of everything the emperor did each day, from major events down to what he ate at each meal. This style of record-keeping actually began during the Zhou dynasty, which started around 1000 BC. Its purpose was to hold emperors accountable. If an emperor did something shameful, it would be recorded for future generations to see. For the fifth Qing emperor, Yongzheng, who ruled from 1722 to 1735, there were 2 volumes of this diary produced every month, 24 volumes a year, right up until his death. So what did a typical day look like? Each day began at 5 a.m. sharp, when the self-ringing bell at the Hall of Union in the Forbidden City chimed. Wake up time. Yongzheng had to get up immediately, and no, he couldn't sleep in. A palace maid would kneel at his bedside, shouting, 吉祥, 吉祥, which means auspiciousness, non-stop. This human alarm clock only stopped once the emperor was on his feet. Then maids and eunuchs entered to help him wash and get dressed. Once ready, his first duty was to go to Yonghe Palace to pay respects to his mother, Madame Wuya, a daily tradition he inherited from his father, Emperor Kangxi, who was renowned for his filial piety. For 57 years, he visited his grandmother and stepmother every morning until both elders passed away, by which time Kangxi was already 65 years old. His son, Yongzheng, and grandson, Qianlong, both future emperors, carried on this daily act of devotion. After greeting his mother, Yongzheng returned to his study for early morning reading. That's right, he began studying before breakfast. He often read the sacred edicts and veritable records. The sacred edicts were historical decrees and decisions on national affairs, while the veritable records were daily accounts of past emperors, used as guides for governance. Yongzheng also studied literature in both classical Chinese and Manchu, along with subjects like astronomy, mathematics, physics, geography, mechanics, horology, and even Western medicine. He was a true scholar and an academic overachiever. Only after this long self-study session, by which time daylight had broken, did he eat breakfast. He usually dined alone in the morning, and this may have been the most relaxed part of his day. But even then, eunuchs would bring him petitions from ministers, requesting an audience. Each petition listed the official's background and discussion topic, so the emperor had to consider who to summon, all while eating. By 7 a.m., it was time for morning court, and believe it or not, 7 a.m. was considered late by Qing standards. His father, Kangxi, held court at 5 a.m., with officials required to line up outside long before 5. Most Qing emperors held court only every few days, but Kangxi and Yongzheng were exceptions. They were the most diligent rulers of the dynasty. In fact, Kangxi held court almost daily, and Yongzheng never missed a single court daily session during his 13-year reign. Now, forget what you see on TV. There was no grand dragon throne, no dramatic chanting of "Long live the emperor." That's theatrical fantasy. In reality, court was held at the Gate of Heavenly Purity, a location designated by Kangxi himself. Only senior officials from top government ministries were allowed to attend. Many of them had to wake up at 3 a.m. and rush to court. mumbling their speeches under their breath, because they had to memorize their reports. That's right, officials weren't allowed to read from a paper. Every memorial had to be recited from memory. During court, the emperor sat in the center, flanked by secretaries and department heads. Officials knelt, submitted their folded memorials, and recited the contents aloud. If someone stumbled or got it wrong, they were publicly humiliated. Imagine being told by the emperor that you didn't understand your own department. That was a career-crippling embarrassment. So, because the emperor woke up early, his ministers had to rise even earlier to do their homework before court. After court, ministers returned to their offices, and the emperor changed out of his formal dragon robe into more comfortable clothes. But the work didn't stop. He immediately began reviewing memorials and making comments, a task known as 朱批奏折, which means red ink commentary, because he used red ink to annotate and respond. Due to the heavy volume of paperwork, each memorial was limited to 300 characters. One military officer once submitted a 5,900-character report, and Yongzheng lashed out, "How dare you write something this long?" Yongzheng worked straight through until dinner. He might take a short break beforehand to relax a little, but no nap was allowed. That would be a sign of sloth, something unbecoming of an emperor. Wait, no lunch? That's right. The Qing imperial family followed the Manchu two-meal system, a tradition from their cold northeastern homeland. 2 large meals a day was seen as practical. Dinner was usually served between 1 and 3 p.m. The daily diet of Qing emperors was surprisingly simple. Each meal typically consisted of 8 main dishes, 4 side dishes, plus hot pot, porridge, and soup, tailored to his preferences and the season. And this was pretty much the same for both breakfast and dinner. In contrast, festive banquets were far more extravagant. Take the New Year's Eve family banquet as an example. Just one imperial table required 33 kilos of pork, 20 kilos of wild boar, 10 kilos of lamb, 20 kilos of fish, 7 kilos of venison, and generous amounts of chicken, duck, and geese. Different emperors had different tastes. Emperor Qianlong, for example, had a lifelong obsession with hot pot. In the 54th year of his reign, records show he ate hot pot on at least 200 days that year. Emperor Daoguang, on the other hand, wasn't interested in exotic delicacies. He had a particular fondness for eggs. As for the last emperor, Puyi, he strongly preferred Western cuisine, even though it wasn't often served in the palace. Dinner protocol was strict. Once the food was served, the emperor had to wait. Each dish had to be tested for poison using a special tag. Then eunuchs tasted the food themselves before the emperor's chopsticks could touch it. Also, the emperor was not allowed to become attached to any particular dish. If he reached for the same dish a few times, the eunuch on duty had to immediately replace it. The reason? To prevent anyone from identifying the emperor's favorites and poisoning them. Even as emperor, indulging your appetite was considered inappropriate and even dangerous. Emperor Yongzheng's second and final meal of the day typically ended around 2:30 p.m., early by modern standards. And then, back to work. Yongzheng resumed reading and writing on state matters, especially reviewing provincial memorials. Other emperors, like Qianlong, used the afternoon to meet with the Grand Council ministers to discuss important issues. Sometimes ministers would request an audience with the emperor for specific matters during this time. Yongzheng was the most hardworking Qing emperors, working year-round and taking only one day off each year, his birthday. He worked the other 364 days harder than most professionals today. Even Elon Musk's 100-hour work week seemed tame by comparison. The emperors had been trained from an early age to be diligent. Qing Dynasty princes began formal education at age 6 and had only 6.5 days off each year. To be precise, Dragon Boat Festival, 1 day, Mid-Autumn Festival, 1 day, New Year's Eve, half day, New Year's Day, their own birthday, 1 day each, and their parents' birthdays, 2 days. No winter break, no summer vacation, just 6.5 days off. These princes worked much harder than today's students. After the afternoon work sessions, Yongzheng allowed himself a brief break. Around 5 p.m., he might have a light snack. And when he did unwind, he had a surprising hobby, cosplay. Since he couldn't travel, Yongzheng commissioned painters to create the famous Yongzheng at Leisure series. Dozens of portraits depicting him as different characters. A warrior fighting a tiger, a gentleman playing the zither under the pine trees, a sage floating on a raft, a hermit picking chrysanthemums like the poet Tao Yuanming, a fisherman in a straw cloak meditating in a boat. These imaginative portraits allowed him to live alternative lives, at least on paper. Other emperors might choose more traditional entertainment, like watching opera and appreciating artworks. Then came the evening rituals to honor the gods. Around 7 p.m., after his evening rituals, Yongzheng might choose to spend some time with his empress or one of his concubines. But this decision had to be made during dinner, earlier in the day. Even in matters of intimacy, nothing was spontaneous. Oftentimes, he chose to work, reading more memorials at night. Officially, the emperor was supposed to sleep at 10 p.m., but Yongzheng often worked far past that. Most nights, he slept less than 6 hours. Unlike what people have imagined, the Qing emperors worked very hard. In one instance, Kangxi looked at an official's retirement request and sighed. "You get to retire, I don't. Every report has to be reviewed by me." Being emperor was no blessing. In Imperial China, emperors worked harder than today's Chinese leaders. They were bound by strict court protocol and couldn't act recklessly. The truth is, their job was relentless and exhausting. During his 13-year reign, Emperor Yongzheng personally reviewed over 22,000 private memorials, 190,000 official documents, and wrote more than 40 million characters, averaging nearly 10,000 characters a day. He was so busy that he barely had time to father children. Of his 14 children, 12 were born before he ascended the throne. After becoming the emperor, just 2. But wait, what about the thousands of concubines in the Forbidden City? Do movies show emperors lounging in pleasure palaces, surrounded by beautiful women struggling to choose which one to visit for the night? That's pure fantasy. The Qing emperors didn't have time for indulgence, even though they had many women in the palace. And even when the emperor did spend time with a woman, it was brief and had strict protocols to follow. So, how did the emperor choose which concubine to spend the evening with? Did he have absolute freedom in that choice? And what were the strict protocols governing the emperor's most private moments? That's an entire subject in itself, and the answers may be very different from what you have imagined. I'll explore all of that in the next program. Please subscribe and stay tuned. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.